Hi, my name is Jamie Abbott, and I would like to welcome you to today's webinar for the Recovery Housing Program, DRGR, Draws and Functionality. I would like to note that today's webinar is intended for Recovery Housing Program grantees. Our presenters today are Chuck Creeman and Anya eBay. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Chuck to begin the presentation.
Good afternoon. So today's agenda includes a review of our learning objectives. We're going to look at a refresher of the RHP prior webinars focusing on DRGR. And then we're going to turn it over to our DRGR guru, Anya, to look at the obligation of funds and the processing of vouchers. We're at the point where just about everyone has their action plan in place. Many have projects and activities set up, and hopefully you'll be in the position to quickly start spending more of the funds. A number of you have already done vouchers, so hopefully this will reinforce your existing skills and knowledge. We'll also look at running some of the MicroStrategy reports that you'll need to look at that are helpful. We'll talk about, for example, looking at who you have as responsible entities set up in the system, which is will help you set up everything in the activities and enable you to get funds obligated and drawn. And hopefully we'll quickly get through these preliminaries and focus on your questions and answers. And want to emphasize the main topic for today is the obligation and of funds and the processing of vouchers. So when we're done, at the end of the day, you'll have a better ability to navigate through the DRGR. You'll have a reminder about the process of setting up projects and activities. You'll be able to perform those financial functions, the obligation and drawdown of funds, and you'll be able to be in a position to use the benefits of the MicroStrategy reports. So, Jamie, did you want to handle this part of it, or do you want me? I could proceed.
No, Chuck, that's
Oh,
great.
the
I
host.
will go ahead and take over. I apologize.
Yeah.
So before we get started, we do have a polling question that we would like to ask everyone. So how many grantees know how to obligate funds in DRGR? And please, only the Recovery Housing Program grantees, please answer. So once again, how many grantees know how to obligate funds in DRGR? And the answer is to be provided by RHP grantees only. Give it a few more seconds. Thank you. We have the answers. We have 14% that know how to obligate the funds in DRGR, 31% do not know how to obligate funds in DRGR, and then 11% that is unsure whether or not they know how to obligate funds in DRGR. Okay, next screen. We have another question. Once again, RHP grantees only. Please answer, how many grantees have performed a DRGR drawdown before? We got two options. I have performed a DRGR drawdown before, or I have never performed a DRGR drawdown. Give it a few more seconds. Okay, results are in. We have 24% that have performed a drawdown, and then approximately 34% have never performed a DRGR drawdown. Okay, next screen. Okay, so Recovery Housing Program, DRGR refresher. Chuck, is this turning it over to you?
Okay, so I do want to save as much time as we can for the actual demonstration and the focus on financial. So I'm going to fairly quickly go through this refresher session. So the action plan. We'll go through these topics. And one thing, a couple of preliminaries. Getting familiar with DRGR, one of the most useful things that I found I was able to do is getting on that first login screen after you've logged in, and you hit the home screen, and you'll see a number of icons across the top of the page. And the more you get comfortable identifying where you want to be in the system, as depending on the function, it'll just become more and more easy to use this. So starting with the action plan, you'll notice that icon, there's a manage my grants icon. It's I guess sort of looks like the Parthenon, but you want to be on that icon, and manage my grants will come up as a drop down. You want to get yourself on the correct grant, and be aware of the relationship between your multiple grants and your parent grant, and be able to function among the different grants. Remember that you can be adding to the grant at any time. You can add activities, you can add projects, you can make other kinds of adjustments. Each time you do that, your action plan and your grant will go into a different mode, and you will, before you can proceed, you'll need to get your field office staff to review and approve that modified action plan. So keep your rep advised when you're making those kinds of adjustments, and you can get that process. Most of the amendments now at this point will be fairly minor. It won't take a lot of review to verify that it's approvable, and you should get a prompt turnaround on those. So key point of the useful action plan, and one that works in DRGR successfully, you want to prepare identify what your project and activity relationship and structure. The first level is the project level, and there are some options that we'll look at on how you want to structure that. You need to have it done in a consistent manner so that the functionality doesn't get tripped up as you go through and actually implement your program. So you have your action plan as at the grant level, and in effect, RHP is going to have a single action plan that you will continually amend as the subsequent years of grants occur. And each of those annual grants will be a child grant to the parent grant in your action plan. So you will set up multiple projects. One project, might be, I think we'll discuss administration. Another project, you might have organize them by type of project. You might have new construction as a separate project. You might have rehab activities as a separate project. You might have leasing as a separate project. So whatever organizational structure works, given the nature of your program, you want to make sure you set up your projects at that level. And then you'll have activities below that level. So if you have a project you have one activity under each, at least one activity under each project. You can have multiple activities under each of those projects. So as I mentioned, setting up in advance how you want to structure your projects and the relationship of your activities to those projects is something that you want to think through at the beginning, get it organized in a way that works for you. You may want to have for example, you have a project that's FY 2020 administration and TA, and then you'll set up separate activities as your administration, your 5%, and your technical assistance. You may want to have a broader administration and technical assistance, and then set up a separate activity for each year's allocation. So you could have a FY 2020 admin activity and an FY 2021 activity. So however you want to set up that hierarchy, think it through, that one that works for you, and set it up in that manner. So here's some examples about how you might set up an activity. So project 2 is develop of units. You might have one activity called Metro Recovery Housing, and that's going to involve the acquisition and rehabilitation of property. Another recovery housing development would be Western Valley Recovery Housing Acquisition and Rehab. You may have another series of an alternate way to structure it. You may have the organization at the project level, Metro Recovery Housing. They may have one activity for development. You have a second project, Western Valley. So you can organize it at the project level by activity type, or the project level can be the responsible organization. And they may be, for example, Metro Recovery Housing, they have 3 or 4 different activities that you're funding, or 2 or 3. So however you decide to establish that organizational structure, just follow through consistently. So you've decided on a structure. You'll be on the screen to, under the Manage My Grant function, you'll be creating a project, and just be aware of all the data that you need to have to go through that screen. And remember, the other important thing is to save. You'll create a project number, a title, add a brief description, have a drop down on the status of that activity. You'll put in a budget amount, and it's one of the, it's pretty self-explanatory. You'll the more, and let me back up a moment here on the activities, and let me jump between this. There's once you get to the activity level, this is where you get specific, and one of the things you have to enter is the responsible entity, responsible organization, and that will be in a drop-down menu. If you do not have that particular responsible organization in your system, which is entered somewhere else in DRGR, I'll get to that in a moment, I'll get on the next slide. You want to make sure you do that before you go and start entering that activity, because without that, you won't be able to save it. So to jump ahead quickly, and maybe you've done your MicroStrategy review and know that the Valley Recovery Housing is not yet a responsible organization in your system. You will go to the administration icon across the top of your homepage and look for the drop down on creating a responsible organization. You will enter that information, save it, and then when you go to set up the activity for that that organization is responsible for, they will then appear in the drop-down menu. you select them, then you'll be able to save that activity and it'll be fully functional. So remember to complete that responsible organization process as a necessary prerequisite to getting the activity in a saved status. So and as we did recently, we looked at performance reports. It's another drop down on the Manage My Grants icon of DRGR, and you'll see tabs for financials and narratives. And as was mentioned, one of your first steps is to reconcile and confirm all your financial data, and then add your narratives. DRGR tries to facilitate your work and provides a number of upload templates. You can review them in the DRGR reference section. It's part of the DRGR manual, and I believe there's some special tips and information about the upload templates. This will facilitate getting your data in for performance reporting. So, getting technical assistance for your DRGR work on a recovery housing program. You know that your field office is your first point of contact. Your rep is going to be the one that's going to improve anytime you modify your action plan and need to add new projects, add activities. And the next is the feature to get on-call technical assistance. Before you do that, take the time to go through the website. RHP has a very comprehensive website. It has the notice. It has all kinds of guides. It will have this webinar, and putting in a plug for the previous webinar. If you want to take the time to go through that, I think probably the best place to start in looking at those webinars is just to go through the slides. It gives you a good idea of what the topics are covered. For example, the financials on the previous webinar was pretty brief, starting on slide 33, if you want to make a note of that. In the previous webinar, see, my notes indicate the action plan process started about slide 20, and the project and activity relationships went through about slide 29. If you then want to try the YouTube recording, that'll give you an idea of where to go to the recording. There's also a transcript, as there will be with this session. So your HUD rep, the HUD exchange, and when you get into a particular problem with a specific issue, there is a process for requesting on-call technical assistance, and there's a form that you fill out that will be reviewed by our friends at HUD, and if approved, you can get up to 8 hours initially of direct technical assistance by one of the ICF experts. And one of the points that we wanted to make, and this is very appropriate for the timing of the session, as many of you who are users of DRGR know, there's a biannual recertification process. So if you are an administrator at the grantee level, your friendly HUD rep will be the person you request to renew your certification for the DRGR system. And once you as an administrator are recertified, you then have the ability to recertify your users. And of course, you understand that you'll need at least 2 users in every jurisdiction. As Anya will indicate, at the processing of funding, you will need a voucher preparer and a voucher approver. So you need at least 2 folks in your jurisdiction to get through the process. So as a prelude to getting into that, I guess we have a couple of poll questions.
Yes. Yes, we do. Okay, once again, the Recovery Housing Program grantees, please answer the following. Do grantees have a process for reviewing an invoice before requesting reimbursement? So your options is I have a process for reviewing an invoice before requesting reimbursement, or I do not have a process for reviewing an invoice before requesting reimbursement. Once again, if the RHP grantees could answer the polling question, we'll give it a few more seconds. All right, we have approximately 34% that do have a process for reviewing invoices, and 9% that do not have a process for reviewing an invoice before submitting for reimbursement. Next screen. Our next question, once again, RHP grantees only. How many grantees know how to revise a voucher? First option is I know how to revise a voucher in DRGR. Second question, I do not know how to revise a voucher in DRGR. And last option, I am unsure whether I know how to revise a voucher in DRGR. Please select appropriately. A few more seconds. Okay. 9% know how to revise a voucher. 42% do not know how to revise a voucher. And 5% is unsure whether or not they know how to revise a voucher in DRGR. Next screen. Okay, for RHP grantees, how many grantees expect to receive program income? Please pick between I expect to receive program income or I do not expect to receive program income. Okay, we can get the responses. Okay, it looks like the poll may not be working on this one. Let's go ahead and proceed to the next screen. Okay, I believe we are turning it over to Anye. And Anye, before we get started, we do have a question that has been submitted in chat, if you don't mind. Addressing this or notifying if it will be addressed within your presentation. The question is, what if my initial action plan covered both fiscal year 2020 and fiscal year 2021 allocations? Can I combine the admin for both?
Sure, I can answer this. I think it was in an earlier slide. That is possible. You can create a project, let's say, that is just called admin, and then underneath that project, you can create two activities, one for the 20, one for the 21. So that is allowable. I don't think DRGR would prevent you from doing that. And then when you create the project, within the project, at the very bottom, it will tell you what is the budget for this project. And it should have two options where you can list out the discrete budgets for the 20 portion and the 21 portion.
It will still need to be tracked by fiscal year for compliance.
Right.
Yeah, and what just before you just get started, the other aspect of the two different years, if you received your award and your grant award date is the same for both 20 and 21, you have the same 30% target deadline for expenditure of 30% of your funds. So you want to be cognizant of that as you choose your projects that are moving forward most quickly and which year's funding you allocate to them. You want to be thinking in ahead and being sure that you'll be able to meet the 30% expenditure for both 20 and 21, which will have, because you were awarded both grants on the same date, they'll have both have the same target date. In future, as you go through approving 2022, and if there's a 23 and 24 beyond, the target date will be keyed to the award date in the grant agreement for each separate fiscal year. But those will be amendments to your action plan.
Okay. I think we have another question in the chat, but I think that can be answered in the chat with the link to the last webinar. So I'm going to take this and carry it forward. Just a few things that I wanted to note from the prior section that Chuck just went over. And the question that was just asked kind of leads to this note that I want to make on the project. When you're creating the project, like I said, if you do have the 20 or the 21 grant, child grant, you're going to have the option to put a budget there. You can also see a red asterisk in the field. Regardless or not, whether or not you have a budget for a specific year, just make sure that you put something in both the fields. So maybe you only have the 21 grant, but not the 20. For the 20, just put 0. And for the 21 grant, you would put whatever the budget is. So just make sure that those fields are filled in. And even if you don't have an amount for that proposed budget, just enter 0. That's just going to allow you to be able to save the screen and make sure that the project and activities save properly. On the activity side, when you're creating the activities, just be aware that when you're assigning the activity type, or just make sure that you assign an activity type, especially for your administrative and TA activities. Make sure that you're selecting the right one, just so that DRGR knows to calculate, track specifically what your admin funds are, what are your TA funds, appropriately, and just to make sure you guys are in compliance with the requirements. And then for all activities that have been created, just make sure that your status for those activities are going to be set to underway. And that is to make sure that you can actually draw down the funding. I think there's other criteria like pending or canceled or closed or completed. You don't want to select those, obviously. So just make sure that all your activities are set to underway. All right. So with that said, we're going to move forward and talk about processing payments in DRGR. All right. So the key thing to be aware here, I want to kind of start the conversation about, we refer to transactions or payments or requests for payments as vouchers in the system. So you may be asking yourself, well, what is a voucher? What is included in a voucher? And essentially what a DRGR voucher is that, you know, it reflects a request for payment essentially to HUD to say, hey, we have incurred costs or we are about to incur costs. Please, you know, reimburse us from the federal treasury the funds to recoup the cost. And these costs, when you're submitting these costs to HUD, essentially you're telling HUD that you've done your due diligence. These costs tied to an eligible activity. The costs are allocated appropriately to that activity. And the costs are meeting other requirements, such as, you know, if you're in other grants, you may be dealing with national objective or mid designation or any other type of requirements associated with that cost. But essentially that's what it is. Sometimes HUD may ask you to, you know, include in the voucher in DRGR supporting documentation like invoices and so forth. But I think for you RHP grantees, you will rely on your internal accounting systems or grant management systems to process your files and maintain those files within your systems such that you don't need to import or submit those files as part of your voucher creation in DRGR. When HUD comes to, you know, look at your files, or if they request to see your files, you'll then, you know, work with HUD to, you know, transmit those files to HUD for their review. So just be aware of that. And then when you're talking about creating vouchers, you know, there is a segregation of duties component built into the system. Whereas, you know, in a case where, you know, you have two users, one is going to be the person that's actually creating the voucher, right? And then you're going to have the other user who's going to be in charge of approving the voucher, approving and submitting the voucher to HUD. And then once, you know, a voucher has been created, let's say you've, whether or not, you know, the voucher has been rejected or the voucher has been submitted, you can always go back and revise the voucher. It may not be something that's necessarily applicable to the RHP grant, but, you know, in more complex with more complex grants, you know, with, you know, that track a lot of projects or track a lot of activities, it may be you know, useful to be aware that you can always go back and revise your voucher. If, let's say, you charged costs as wrong activity, you can always go back and fix that. So nothing is ever necessarily set in stone. So we're going to go through in the next few slides, basically, the process of being able to do that, creating your vouchers, processing payments, and hopefully this, you know, helps you guys out. Okay, so the first thing, right? We've talked about creating projects and activities. I think when you're going through that process, you know, for a lot of the accountants or fiscal people on the call, that whole process, I would think of it as creating your budget, right? Once you've created your budget, then you need to go to the next step of actually encumbering your funds. And that's pretty much what this is. There is a feature in DRGR where in your financials, once you've created your projects and activities, you've gotten your action plan approved. Now you can go through the process of, okay, the budgets are approved. Let me go and commit my funding. And you have to commit the funding before you can actually process a payment. And maybe this is a good point to mention this as well. Let's say you've already gotten your action plan approved, but then you go back and add a new activity, or you change something within you add a new activity essentially. You can't obligate or pay money through that activity unless it's been reapproved again by HUD. So just be aware of that. And that's going to be, again, for new activities. If it's an existing activity, you're going to be fine. But you just want to make sure that, you know, if you're creating a new activity, you get it approved through your action plan process or, you know, through DRGR in order to be able to commit the funding and then create your request for payment. All right. So yeah, essentially, when we talk about obligation of funding, is just me saying I want to commit funds out of the budget. So just be aware that you need to do that step first. Now, the math behind creating your doing the obligation essentially is that if we're thinking about here's a budget that we have, let's say we've already drawn some of the money to date, the difference between your budget and any funds that you've probably drawn to date would be what we call your available to obligate. Okay. So if this is your first time doing this, then your entire budget is basically what is available to obligate. The reason why I'm making this distinction again is that in certain situations, if your budget is $1 million for a specific activity, you may not want to obligate the full value of that activity. You may want to obligate only half of that. So then this math sort of plays a part in really you understanding what do I have left. And the neat thing about DRGR is that it kind of does the calculation for you. So this is really not that complex, but just be aware of how the math works. And that's why we have this here. The second thing too is that once you do obligate the funding, right, the next piece of this is to really understand how much you have to draw down. So the math here again is of all the money that you've actually obligated, you want to discount how much has already been drawn down, right, and how much is pending drawdown. The difference between those three things is going to tell you how much of your grant funding do you have available to request another payment through the system. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense, but if it doesn't, I can clarify later through the Q&A. All right. So the first step in creating the voucher is once the funds are obligated, you're going to go to your management financials. There's going to be the option to go and create a voucher. Essentially, what you're going to do is you're going to do a search within your grant for the activity that you're looking for. You're going to select either one or more activities. If you've already obligated the funding, what you'll see is that the activity will have an obligation amount, which is telling you, hey, here's how much you can actually ask for, your max, right? And then what you're going to do is you're going to tell the system, okay, of this maximum amount, here's how much I'm actually processing right now. And again, there's a neat feature in DRGR where you can check it and do like a calculation to see if I were to process this amount, how much would be left after. So there's all these little checks and balances in the system to help you through the process. But that's basically what you're going to do. You're going to create the voucher by looking for activities. Either you're going to process one activity or more. You're going to put the amount that you're requesting from HUD. You're going to say next, go through the screens, and then submit it to HUD. Well, submit it. The reviewer will submit it. And then the next step is that the voucher approver, whoever that is, will log into their account. They're going to go to Manage My Financials. They'll look for that specific voucher, which should be in the open status. They'll find the voucher, they'll open it up. They will review it, make sure that everything looks good, that we're drawing from the correct activities. And then they're going to say approved, submit to HUD. There's going to be the option to email HUD as well, just to get them a notification that a voucher was processed. I'm not sure that that's a requirement, but you can do that. You can do so. And once that voucher is submitted, it's good to go. I believe the threshold for RHP grants is going to be anything below 5 million is basically automatic. So what that means is once the grantee approver approves that voucher, you should expect that within 2 to 3 days, the money from the federal treasury should be in your, in your account within that time frame. Okay, and that's pretty much the process from start to finish. And I know I just said a lot of words. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to have a live demonstration where I'll go through the process step by step and show you guys what that actually looks like. All right. So now I'm going to just share my screen. And if someone can just confirm for me that y'all can see my screen now, that'd be helpful.
Anya, we can see your screen.
Great. Okay. So basically what I've done is I've logged into DRGR. I'm currently in the role of someone who is the voucher creator. Okay. So up to this point, my action plan has been approved. I've created my projects and activities. I'm pretty much set. Now I have a payment, a cost that I want to get reimbursement for. I want to go into the system and process that payment. The first step is the first step is what we discussed, right? I need to go and make sure that my obligation is good. So I'm going to go to $. I'm going to go under where it says drawdown, which is the left-hand side of this. And you're going to see the option for search and edit obligation. Quick question. You guys can see my screen. Is it legible? Or should I make it bigger?
If you can make it bigger, it would be
There you go.
beneficial. There we go. Perfect.
All right.
Thank you.
So again, $, go to search and edit obligation. Okay. So my grant number is here. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit search. It's going to give me all activities that I'm looking for. So you can see here, this is an example of a grantee. They have 20 funds and they have 21 funds. What I'm going to be looking for is this specific activity, okay, for this program. You're going to go to maintain. So this is the activity, right? You're going to go to maintain. When you go to maintain, you're going to see the screen that looks like this. And if you remember the math that I was showing you on the screen, the slides earlier, you have your budget, your obligated amount, your drawdown amount. And this is broken down again into program funds and program income funds. And then here is the available for obligation. And here is the current obligation amount. So the way to read this is that, and then you can see here you have the two different grants, the 21 and the 20 and the 21. As you can see in this case, I think the way the grantee set it up is that they have a specific activity for each year on its own. But if you had one activity, going back to the question that was asked earlier, that activity could encompass both 20 and 21. And within the screen, you can see that you can have the option to obligate funding specifically to the year that's applicable. All right. But in this case, it's one-to-one. So we don't have to worry about this row down here. We're really just looking at this row up here. All right. So the way to read this is my budget. When I created my action plan, this is the budget that I signed for this activity. And then the obligated amount is going to be equal to whatever's in this column here. This column tells this column what I want to obligate. And it's always going to be cumulative, right? It's not in deltas. This is all cumulative. So again, you can see I obligated 900,000 before. Of the 900,000, we've processed 879,000 in draws, and that's all grant funding, zero program income. So I hope that makes sense. These two columns here equals the drawn amount. This drawn amount is a subset of this obligated amount. All right. And what I mean by that is, well, you can't really see it here, but there's a variance here, obviously. So let's say I was trying to process a drawdown right now for $50,000, right? So the variance here, let's call it $21,000, right? I don't have enough obligated, correct? So I need a little bit more. So the way to address this situation is I can go in here and I can say this variance, this available amount to obligate, let me just go ahead and obligate the full amount, right? Okay, so I'm going to go in here and just going to say, let's obligate the full budget, right? And then I'm going to hit save. And once I hit save, the system is going to calculate what that looks like now. So my available for obligation is 0. That means I've exhausted my full budget. The obligated amount has become $965. And now I should have enough to process that $50,000 payment. All right. I hope that makes sense. So now I'm good for the obligation. I'm good to go. So now I'm going to go ahead and try to create my voucher. I'm going to go back to manage my financials. There's an option here to create a voucher. All right. So as I was saying earlier, what you want to do is you want to look for your activities. That's essentially what you're doing here. This is like the voucher template almost, you know, it gives you the date. It doesn't have the voucher number just yet, but it will. So now I'm going to say, yes, let's go add activities. Here in this screen, again, I could just click search. I don't think, well, it depends how many grants you have, to be honest, but we're in RHP grant. So I could just click search. It'll give me all the activities for 20 and 21. But let's say I just wanted to specify my search. I can look for this specific grant number, hit search. It's going to return all the activities that are only related to this grant number. So here we are, we have 3 activities and we obligated funds for this activity. This is the one that we're drawing down for. So I'm going to select this column. There's 2 columns here. One is select program funds, one is select receipt funds. This one here is referring to program income. That's not what I'm drawing down for. I'm drawing for program funds. So I'm going to select this column. I'm going to say add selected activities to voucher. And there we go. So now in the voucher, it has a specific voucher line item for this activity. And you can see here as the fund type, we've selected that this is going to be program fund. I don't want to add more activities right now, so I'm just going to say continue. All right. So now in the next screen, this is the variance that I was talking about earlier, right? So this number is basically telling you what is the amount between the difference between the budget minus sorry, I need to think for a second. This is the difference between the budget minus what's been drawn to date. So I said I wanted to draw down for $50,000. And then here's the check and balances here, right? You can say update available amount. And basically what this tells you is after I've drawn this amount down, I should have about 35,000 left over remaining in this activity. Okay. If everything looks good to me, I'm going to go ahead and say submit voucher. And you're not quite done yet, so you can review it one last time to make sure there's no mistakes. You can see now you have a voucher number associated with this. You have the voucher total. You have the submission date, the grantee name, the user name, the creation date, and here's the activity information. Here's the drawdown amount. If you want to attach documentation, you can do so right here. I don't think this is a requirement for RHP, so you may not use this. All your files will be in your internal systems or records. If you want to leave a comment for the approver or for HUD, you can do so here. If everything looks good to you, you go ahead and select confirm voucher. And here's the option to create an email that can be sent to HUD. I don't think you need to do this, so you can just hit cancel. But if you wanted to, you can say send. It's up to you. I don't think this is a requirement. But at this step, your voucher's already been created. So we're pretty much good to go. All right. Let's run that back. So let's say we wanted to look for that voucher. So we can go to search and maintain vouchers to make sure we've actually created it. All right, so let's say I don't know what the voucher number is. The grant number we know is going to be 20 grant. When you create a voucher, it's going to be an open status. So if you wanted to, you can go to line item status and select open. All right, and you hit search. So we have 2 vouchers here. We created this one before. This needs to get approved. We haven't approved it yet. So maybe we can approve it today. And then there's another one that we just created. You see it right here. So here's the activity. It has its own voucher number. Here's the amount that we're trying to process. All right. So good. We created the activity, the voucher. So now it's the next step is to approve it. So just bear with me for a second. I need to log back in. And hopefully this works. Good. All right, so log back in as the approver, okay? I have 2 vouchers that are waiting for my approval. And the cool thing about DRGR is that it kind of tells you that, right? So on the home screen, you see this information right here. It's basically telling you, hey, dude, you have 2 vouchers right here. You created this one on the 13th. It's been pending for 2 days. Get on it. And your colleague has created another one today, so make sure you approve it. So it kind of flags these things for you, just so you're aware. And again, this is going to be on the approver role, which is what I'm currently on. Okay, so to get to these vouchers, what do? I'm going to go to manage my financials again. As you can see, there is no option to create a voucher because I don't have the permissions. I can edit the obligation if I wanted to, but I don't create vouchers. So I'm going to go to search and maintain, and I'm going to do the exact same thing I did before. I'm going to go to the grant that I'm looking for, which is going to be this. I'm going to look for open vouchers. I'm going to search, and there they are. So what I'm going to do is, ideally, the person that created the voucher, there would be an invoice review process. They would have reviewed the costs and made sure that everything made sense. At this point, I may QA/QC the voucher to double check again that the costs that we're charging to the grant make sense, that we're charging to the right activity, the right program, making sure there's no concerns that I have. So on the approval screen, I hope you guys saw what I did. I'll do it again if anyone missed it. But this is going to be the approval screen. It has the voucher number, the user that created it, the grantee name, the creation date. What you're going to do is you're going to select what we're approving. If there's multiple activities, you can select all the activities. And you can leave a comment if you want for HUD or for yourself. As you can see, the grantee requester, they left a comment here, so you'll be able to see that as well. If I had a problem with this voucher, I can reject it. And again, what you're rejecting and approving is going to be based on the specific line items. So what I did not do here is create a voucher with multiple line items, but let's say there were 2 or 3 activities here. I can reject one and approve the other 2. So that is possible. Here it's pretty simple, just one activity. So I can either approve it or reject it. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and approve. So you'll get a notification, line items are approved successfully, voucher approved, total $10,000. Okay, and that's pretty much it. If I go to return to search voucher, as you can see, that other voucher is no longer here. The reason is that it should be in approved status. So I'll look for approved, search. Oh, sorry, I need to look for the grant. Let's try that again. There we go. So there you go. So this is the voucher we just approved, and you can see that right there. So again, just to reiterate, you look for open vouchers, and to approve them, you go to this option here where it says under action, you click maintain. You select your line items if everything looks good, and you can approve. So there we go. Now, if you wanted to double check where we stand, what we can do is we can go to search edit obligation. Oh, let's try it again. Oh, wait, I need to save. There we go. Got to make sure your grant number is here. All right, so let's try it again. So search. All right, I'm looking for acquisition of real property. I'm going to go to maintain. We've already obligated all the funding, so there's nothing really to do here, but I just want to show you this. So if you guys remember, the drawdown amount was about $879. We processed $60,000 in new costs. So you can see the drawn amount is now $929. And if we wanted to do another drawdown, we have only about, what did we say, $34,000 that we can process, or $33,000. So that just, you know, a quick way to see how the system is updating itself in real time. All right, so that was it. Hopefully that.
Anya, before moving on, we do have a question.
Sure.
How would you define the activity type of technical assistance? I have admin, acquisition, and rehab.
I can't remember at the moment. Is there, I think there should be, sorry, bear with me. Let me jump back in. It'll be easier if I could see it, so we're not guessing.
Is there a drop down on in the activity type for TA?
That's what I think there should be, but let me, so here's the activity
We
type.
had some issues with the way
Yeah,
the
we
drop
should,
downs were structured initially.
yeah, there should be, if you guys can see my, you guys can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay, so there's the admin right there, and there's technical assistance right here. Sorry, I just want to clarify one thing. Is the person also asking like if they wanted to combine? Well, I think there is the option to combine both admin and TA projects, correct? But we're going to have discrete activities for each. Is that right, Chuck?
Yeah, I think they're tracking the cap 5% on admin, 3% for TA.
Right. Okay. So yeah, for admin activities, you select admin. For the TA activities, you select technical assistance. And as Chuck was alluding to, there were some minor bugs in the system early on. If you're not seeing this list, just work with HUD to get it fixed.
Yeah. So I don't know if the question involves what's the nature of an activity that'd be classified as TA. I mean, it's if you need to provide to TA to a potential applicant to I don't know.
I guess to like a
I mean,
responsible organization, maybe if you're providing, yeah.
You know, I'm not sure if you're contemplating, you know, for example, hiring ICF to help you design your action plan, or having somebody, for example, sometimes a foggy area between administration and technical assistance. If you're hiring somebody to put on a workshop for potential applicants, you're going to have a presentation at a assemblage of recovery housing operators in your state, and you're trying to give them information about how to apply for an RHP grant from your jurisdiction. You might classify that activity as technical assistance. I don't know if HUD has any thoughts about chiming in and how to, you know, where that distinction comes in.
Thanks. This is Corey. Yeah, I think Onya and Chuck, you're getting to the point. You know, technical assistance, it's not defined in our regulations, but it's goes toward it, you know, increasing the capacity of an entity to carry out an activity. So if the state is providing that type of assistance, or if the state is contracted to provide that type of assistance to another entity to increase its capacity to carry out an activity, that is what technical assistance is. Aaron, I don't know if you have anything else to add to further kind of distinguish the two.
I think that's exactly it. I don't have anything else to add.
All right. So I'm going to log out now. And I think we want to pivot to slides. Can everyone see the slides?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so that covers it in terms of how to obligate funding and process vouchers in the system. We're going to move on now to talk about MicroStrategy. We've sort of danced around this topic in the previous webinars, but we wanted to dig into it now because, you know, DRGR's MicroStrategy is a useful system, and I think it's important for grantees to know how to use it, to get to it, you know, navigate it. All right, so essentially MicroStrategy, what is it? When you go into DRGR under, and I apologize, I just logged off, but there is on the top right a little icon that looks like a pie chart with a slice getting taken out. When you click that, you're going to see two options. One is My Reports, and the other one is Public Data Portal or Public Data Reports. When you click My Reports, it's going to open up a new tab in a new tab in your browser. That's going to take you to what we call MicroStrategy. And essentially what that is that it's kind of like the reporting feature of the system. All the action plan information that you put into the system, all your vouchers that you process in the system, you can go to MicroStrategy to sort of export data into, you know, PDF or Excel CSV files that can allow you to either do some quick analysis, verify data that's in the system. So it's just useful to know that it's there and how to use it. We're not going to cover too much about it today, apart from just giving you some useful common reports that you want to probably have in the back of your mind when you're managing the grant. So yeah, anyways, so where do we start? Bear with me for a second. All right, so what you're seeing in the screenshots that are right here is sort of screenshots from the system. And maybe now that I'm talking through it, well, actually, no, sorry. I'm just going to go through the slides first, and then we can go into the system. So yeah, so the screenshots to the right basically just show you different folder structures in the system. I will go through after these slides, how to navigate so you can see how to get there. But anyways, there's different options. Don't get confused. What you want to navigate to is the folder called DRGR Analytics. Once you get to that folder, you'll click on another folder called Shared Reports. And once you're in Shared Reports, you're going to have different groupings of folders. Within each folder are sort of specific reports that sort of fit the same theme. So either you're going to have reports that give you information about administrative data in DRGR, or global finance here will be specific reports tied to financial information. And then there's also a folder like global performance that give you like reports that provide information about maybe performance measures that you're tracking through the RHP grant. Great. So here, what I want to just go through is, again, some of the common reports that we just want you guys to have some awareness about. And this is sorted by admin, finance, and performance. There are other folders like compliance and so forth. And again, the folders are a lot more exhaustive than what you're seeing here. We're not trying to cover everything, but just the major ones. So the first report that we would like you guys to be aware of is called the A12 report. And basically what the A12 does is that it provides you a list of all the responsible organizations that have been entered into your profile. Again, you could go into DRGR, go to the administrative module and look for this. But basically what this report does, you can export it and it'll give you a listing of all the responsible organizations. And I believe it'll also have additional fields like the address info and DUNS number. Again, all of this is basically being exported out of the system. And it's only going to export what has been entered into the system. So, hopefully there's no bad data, but if there's been bad data entered into the system, it's just going to export that right out. But that will be a good way to check to see, do we need to fix something or correct information in the system too? So just be aware of that. The next report that you'll find in the system is in the admin folder. It's called the 831. There's the 831, there's the 832. They're pretty much similar. Basically what this does is that it exports narrative, especially for the performance report. So I think we talked about this in the last webinar. There are specific fields where you can enter narrative. Basically, this report allows you to export that narrative into PDF or CSV format. It's probably a long way to do it. I mean, you could just go to your performance report module and just export the PDF, but just wanted to highlight this report just so you know that, the feature is there. And then there's the A42. Again, this is kind of similar to the responsible organization list. You may have a lot of grantee users in the system. This is a quick way to export a CSV file to see who are all the users for that grant and what role do they have in the system. So, who is a reviewer, who is a voucher creator, who's an approver, who's an action plan submitter. It'll give you all that information. So just be aware of that. This is the F44. This is now getting into the finance reports. So as you saw when I was creating the voucher, right, there's this term called voucher line item. So there's the voucher and there's the voucher line item. The distinction there is that a voucher is a complete request for payment, whereas like the voucher line item is like specific itemized costs or within that request for payment. And in the world of DRGR, voucher line items correspond to discrete DRGR activities that were created, right? So this report basically just runs a financial report at that level, the most detailed level that it can, which is the voucher line item level, for all vouchers that have been processed for the grant. This is good to know because, again, when you do your performance reporting, you need to validate the federal expenditures for your annual performance report. This is a good way to just validate. If there's any discrepancies, you can use this report to reconcile data. There's a similar report too, which is what we're going to go into next, which is the F45. This, I believe, provides a little bit more details, whereas the F44 will be a little high level. So again, just make reference to both reports. They're pretty much similar, but the F45 includes a little bit more detail. So just have that in your toolkit. And then we get into the F67. This is also kind of high level, and it's not going to be detailed. It's going to just show you by activity, responsible organization, activity type, and national objective, cumulatively, what the drawdown has been for those at that level. So again, you can make use of these three finance reports at any time to sort of understand, where you are in terms of your grantee progress. They can be used as a way to track, how you're doing against 30% and how you're doing against 100% and your timeliness of expenditures. And then the last report is the P42. And again, you can make use of this during your annual performance reporting. What this does is that, again, it exports a report of all the proposed accomplishments. And again, when we talk about proposed accomplishments, we mentioned this in the last webinar. These are all your measures that you've entered, at the time of creating your activities for your action plan. So, you know, if you said we intend to help 30 people who are, you know, maybe in shelters, you know, and then let's say as part of your annual performance report, you've entered that at this point in time, we've helped 10 people. This report will allow you to export that data so you can see it in a, you know, somewhat organized fashion in Excel. So those are all the reports. I'm going to quickly transition to now going into the system. And before I do that, all these reports, again, are in the system. There's a variety of ways to save these reports. Either you can save them to your personal folder, or you can save them, or you can flag them in what DRGR calls like a history list. So if you were to go back into MicroStrategy and you want to go to a report that you just used, you can quickly access it without having to search for it again. And there's also the option to subscribe to specific reports. You know, if your user profile has your email embedded in, your work email embedded in it, you can subscribe to specific reports that can get emailed to you at whatever frequency that you want as well. So there's many ways to access these reports. And then I just wanted to make a notation that, you know, there is a chapter 35 in the DRGR user manual. So you can read up on that and get more details about step-by-step of how to do it. All right. So now, before we get into Q&A, I'm just going to quickly share my screen again. And if someone can just confirm that you guys can see that.
Yes, but is there a way to increase the size? Wonderful,
So-
thank you.
All right. So when you log into, when you access MicroStrategy, there's two of these folders right now, but typically it should only be these two folders. So ignore the third one. And again, ignore DRGR OLTP. Where you want to go to is DRGR Analytics. And then you're going to see shared reports, my reports, history list, my subscriptions. So these three here are getting at what I just talked about. If you find a report that you like, you can save that report. Once you save it, it's going to go to your my reports. If there's a report that you just used and you want to reference it so you can come back to it later when you log back in, you can say save to my history list and it'll save it here. And you can see these for previously run reports. And I believe it shows save because you can run reports based on specific criteria as well. So I believe it'll save it exactly with those same filters if there was some manipulation that you did. And then if you're scheduling specific reports to be emailed to you at specific times, you can do that through your My Subscriptions, which is going to be here. Again, all these steps and how to do them, you can find them in chapter 35. All right, so let's say it's my first time going to DRGR, and I want to access the standard canned reports that the system already has built. What you can do is you can go to shared reports. Uh-oh. Let's see. There we go. Okay, shared reports. And you're going to have 7 reports: global finance, global admin, finance, history, compliance, grants, performance, and then standard reports. I think you want to focus just on these 6, but HUD can tell me if there's a reason for this one. I don't think I use this one much, but these are going to be the main folders. Let's go to finance. So when you go to finance, you'll see it has a bunch of reports, right? And obviously we didn't cover everything today, but you can see there's a lot of reports here, okay? And what we discussed, we talked about F44 and the F45. So let's say I wanted to see this report. You can go here. It takes a bit of time, so just bear with the system. There we go. Oh. Okay. I don't know if it makes sense to keep going, but hopefully we got some, we understand how the, let's see, maybe I should try one more time. If not, then I'll just wrap it up here and then we can go straight to Q&A. It's a bit buggy, this test environment, so let's give it one more chance. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to filter for RHP here. So I just want to show you a quick example of what the report looks like for the F45. Because I like this report a lot and I use it a lot for other grants that I manage. So you can see here, you have the left side. You can quickly click on any of these reports. I'm not going to because it's going to refresh my screen and I want to stay here. But if you wanted to, you can navigate between all these different reports on the left-hand side. If I wanted to go back to a specific page that I was just on, you can do it at the very top here. And you can see what I just did, right? Originally, it was giving me only information for the NSP program. So down here, you can select which program you're looking for. I want RHP, and that's what I got. Right now, it's specifically giving me information for just the 2020 grant. And that's also another thing I should probably talk about. The reporting is going to be specific to the child. So when we talk about the child, we're talking about, in your case, each specific year. So 20, 21, 22. So if I wanted to get a complete picture of my RHP progress, regardless of the year, I would probably want to export the data multiple times for each year that's here to get the complete picture. If I just want it 20, then this is perfectly fine, but just be aware that typically you may be running reports for each specific children. So yeah, let's say that I'm good with this report. It gives me the project number, the project title, the activity number, the voucher numbers, the vouchers that have been processed. It gives me the dates when they were processed. It's a very good report. It gives me the information about the amounts that have been processed to date, which is great. And another thing that just came to mind is that, so today we just processed 2 vouchers, right, for 60,000. In terms of the DRGR reports, the information is not going to show up until the next day. So just be aware of that. If you're making changes or you're doing something in DRGR today, it's going to show up in MicroStrategy tomorrow. So that's why you do not see the 10,000 and the 50,000 that we just did. If we waited till tomorrow, DRGR will refresh and the reports will reflect the data. So if I'm good with this, let's say that I want to export it. You can go at the very top here. There's it's 3 icons from the right. There's an export button. You can click the export and it gives you the option of Excel, CSV. I typically do CSV, but you know, you can do whatever you want. And then there's the option here. Let me make this a little bit bigger. There's the option right here to export the data. Okay. So the third option from the right is Excel. This is PDF. I believe this is the option to schedule this report. Might be forgetting. I think this should be the option, if you guys can see my screen. This is the option to add to the history list, as we just discussed. You can share this report if you want, right here. And you could also do it here as well. So if you click this downward icon right here, you can add to your history list, you can subscribe, you can export, print, And I think if you hit save, there we go. So if you hit save, it'll save it to your My Reports. It's currently empty. You can change the name of it if you want. F44 My Report. For me only, hit OK. And if you hit OK, it should save that report to that folder. And you can go back and access it whenever you want. Let's go to Home. Let's go to My Reports. There it is. All right, so let me stop there. I just wanted to make sure that I covered everything. Hopefully that made sense and it was clear. If not, you can refer back to this training or ask for TA or ask for head assistance. Sorry, I wanted to be careful about time, so I think that's it. Any questions?
Just as a reminder, if you have any questions, please insert them into the Q&A chat box. In the meantime, I would like to notify that there will be a RHP office hours held on January 12th, 2023 at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Registration will be, a notification will be sent out to all the RHP grantees of this office hours. And you can utilize the office hours to ask additional questions about DRGR for the RHP grant. In the meantime, you have an opportunity to ask your questions now in the chat box.
Anya, did you want to make a comment about more complex vouchers that are maybe something about multiple lines on a particular voucher? Anya, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Chuck. So yeah, in the example that I showed, we're dealing with one voucher, one activity, or one voucher line item. There is the option to add multiple activities on one voucher, which would then be corresponding to multiple voucher line items to one voucher. Again, it'll be the same process, specifying, making sure that you've obligated the funding that you need, and then specifying the right amounts for each of those voucher line items. And then, like I showed before, you can approve one or more or reject one or more of those line items as well. So it's a complete package of multiple of a combination of activities. So up to your discretion how you want to process those vouchers for HUD. Oh, and I'm just seeing a note here. I just want to mention, obviously you want to do your review before creating vouchers. So, to your best of your ability, make sure that you're getting your vouchers correct the first time and just minimizing, future revisions if you can. And, refer back to your PMPs to make sure that there's a process for reviewing invoices and minimizing those revisions. Oh, and another point to make, if you are doing revisions, it's going to be for activities within the same grant, such that you don't have the ability to really revise vouchers across different grant numbers. And let me just ask HUD about this. This is going to be at the child level, is that correct? So you can't revise funds across different child grants?
Yes, that's correct. The revisions have to be for activities within the same grant. Child grant.
Now, if you're making changes, the other point to reemphasize is if you're making changes at the activity level, that needs to be submitted as a revised action plan. And while that action plan is being processed and approved, you're not in a position to make a draw or to approve a voucher. You have to get your HUD rep to approve your revised action plan. That puts you in a position to submit a voucher. Is that correct, Anya?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry,
You're
I
good.
was
You're good.
Chuck. I wasn't sure if you were going
Sure.
to
Whoever.
ask me. Yes, but I was going to say, so for example, if you have an approved action plan that does not have an activity or project yet, and then you set up your projects and the corresponding activities, you will need to submit that action plan to HUD before you can try to submit a voucher. You will not see any of those activities available until HUD approves your action plan.
Okay, the time is 3:29 p.m. At this time, we do not have any questions in the chat box. But I would like to once again remind that for the RHP grantees, there will be an office hours held on January 12th, 2023. And information about the registration for that office hours will be sent out here within the next few days.
Just one thing. I think I do see a question, unless it was already answered. I think this person is asking about the national objective and environmental assessment for admin and TA activities. For the environmental assessment, it should be exempt, unless I'm missing something. And the national objective would also be NA. So yeah, that is correct, because those two activities should be exempt, correct, HUD?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. Yes, and I think the drop downs on the screen should be, you won't have many options, if I remember correctly.
Aaron, if you could repeat yourself, you were breaking.
So it will only let you select the drop down only. Sure. Oh, sorry. My headphones are falling out. Yes, I was just saying, I believe, if I remember correctly, when you are on the DRGR screens, there will be a limited number of selections. So I believe it probably will only give you the option to select the NA national objective. Regardless, it's all going to be at the end of the day LMC. So it's fine for RHP. And then as far as the environmental goes, yeah, I think that you may only be able to select exempt, but if you encounter any issues, just reach out to your HUD rep and we can assist.
Okay, with that, that is the conclusion of today's webinar. This webinar will be posted onto the RHP website, which the link for that website has been posted into the Q&A at hudexchange.info. And just type in RHP and there will be additional links for you to click onto to get to previous webinar trainings. Thank you for attending today's presentation. I hope you found it all very helpful.